If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever felt the sting of someone trying to embarrass you just because of who you are, then this story will hit close to home. Because what happened to Olivia James, a 34-year-old project manager at a mid-sized Atlanta tech company, is something no employee should ever go through. She walked into that conference room thinking it was just another routine Monday presentation. She didn't know her manager, Greg Lawson, was about to pull one of the most humiliating stunts of her career, right in front of her colleagues, executives, and even a board member. But what happened just minutes later? That was the moment Greg realized he had made a very big mistake. Stick around, because by the end of this story you'll not only see how Olivia turned the tables on him in the most unexpected way, but you'll also discover something deeper. Why underestimating the quiet strength of someone can backfire in ways you never saw coming. Olivia James wasn't new to hard work. Raised by a single mother in Birmingham, Alabama, she learned early that nothing was ever handed to her. She worked 2 jobs through college, graduating with a degree in business administration. By the time she hit her 30s, she had carved out a career in project management that earned her respect, at least from most people. But respect wasn't something Greg Lawson, her manager, liked to give. Greg was the kind of man who lived for control. Mid-40s, graying hair, always with that smirk that made you feel like he knew something you didn't. He had a habit of cutting women off mid-sentence in meetings, of taking credit for ideas he hadn't come up with, and of dismissing Olivia's suggestions with a wave of his hand. Still, Olivia kept her head down. She wasn't there to stroke Greg's ego. She was there to do her job, and she was good at it. Her team trusted her, her projects stayed on track, and she had a reputation for being the one person who could turn chaos into order. But Greg didn't like that. He saw Olivia's quiet confidence as a threat, and the more she succeeded, the more he looked for ways to undermine her. The breaking point came during a Monday morning meeting. Olivia had been leading a major client project for 6 months, a software rollout worth millions. She had worked late nights, coordinated teams across states, and handled last-minute crises with grace. This meeting was supposed to be a progress update. Olivia had her slides ready, her data clear, and her talking points sharp. But as soon as she began, Greg interrupted. "Actually, Olivia," he said loudly, "before you dive in, I think the team deserves to know something. There have been issues, mistakes, serious ones." The room went silent. Olivia froze for half a second, her hand gripping the clicker. She hadn't expected that. Greg leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the room like a showman on stage. "Now, I don't like calling people out," he continued, "but when mistakes happen, accountability matters. And Olivia here has made some choices that nearly cost us this client." A ripple of whispers moved across the table. Olivia's stomach tightened. She wanted to defend herself, but Greg wasn't finished. He clicked his laptop and suddenly a slide appeared on the screen. Charts and numbers that looked messy, incomplete, even wrong. "Here's what happens when deadlines are missed," Greg announced. "And these delays? These are on her watch." It was a trap, a carefully staged ambush meant to humiliate her in front of everyone. And for a moment it worked. Olivia felt the heat rising in her chest, the room spinning just slightly as she processed what was happening. She glanced around and saw her team members looking confused, even concerned. But here's the thing about Olivia James. She wasn't the type to crumble. What Greg didn't know was that Olivia had something he didn't expect: receipts. For a long moment, Olivia stood still. The whispers echoed, and Greg sat there with that smug grin, like a king on his throne. He thought he had her cornered. But Olivia wasn't going to play his game. She calmly set the clicker down, adjusted her blazer, and took a slow breath before speaking. "Greg," she said evenly, her voice carrying across the room, "thank you for sharing your version of events. But since we're talking about accountability, why don't we make sure everyone has the full picture?" The room quieted. Heads turned. Even the board member sitting at the end of the table leaned forward. Olivia walked to the laptop connected to the projector. With a few clicks, she pulled up her own presentation. One she had double-checked and saved in multiple formats because she knew Greg's habits. The first slide appeared. A clean, professional timeline showing every project milestone. Each deadline had been met, and each challenge had been documented with solutions. "Here's what actually happened," Olivia said, her tone still calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "Yes, there were challenges, as there always are in large rollouts, but we addressed them, solved them, and kept the client informed every step of the way. In fact," she clicked again. This time, emails from the client filled the screen, praising her leadership, thanking her for quick responses, and applauding her team's efficiency. The whispers started again, only this time they weren't against Olivia. They were against Greg. Olivia glanced at him. His smirk had faded. "And those numbers Greg showed you?" she continued. "Those weren't project delays. They were forecast models I drafted at the beginning of the rollout to predict possible risks. Risks we ended up avoiding entirely." A few people in the room nodded, recognizing the reports. Greg's face reddened. He stammered, "Well, let's not get lost in the weeds here." But Olivia didn't let him regain control. "No," she said firmly, locking eyes with him. "Let's stay right here in the facts. Because when someone tries to rewrite the narrative, it's important we ground ourselves in truth. And the truth is simple. This project isn't just on track. It's ahead of schedule. And the client," she clicked again. A testimonial letter from the client's CEO appeared, praising the company and specifically naming Olivia as the reason for their confidence in the partnership. "They're so satisfied," Olivia finished. "They're already considering a second contract." The room erupted into quiet applause, something unheard of in these Monday meetings. Greg looked like someone had pulled the rug from under him. His little performance had backfired, and everyone could see it. But Greg wasn't done. Humiliation stung, and he wasn't about to take the loss quietly. "You know what, Olivia?" he snapped, his voice cracking. "You've gotten too comfortable. Maybe you think you can run things better than your manager. Maybe you think you're untouchable. But let me remind you, I decide who gets promoted. I decide who gets recognized." Gasps spread across the table. It was no longer subtle. Greg had made it personal, and worse, he had exposed his insecurity to everyone. Olivia didn't flinch. She folded her arms, tilted her head slightly, and gave him a look that said, "Are you sure you want to go there?" "Greg," she said, her voice calm but icy, "recognition isn't something you hand out like a prize. It's something earned. And respect, that's something you build or lose with your actions." The board member cleared his throat. "She's right." His voice carried authority, cutting through the tension. "From what I've seen today, Olivia hasn't just kept this project alive. She's elevated it. And frankly, this level of leadership is exactly what this company needs." The entire room shifted. What was supposed to be Olivia's humiliation had turned into Greg's reckoning. Greg could feel the ground slipping from under him. His face was flushed, his voice uneven, but his pride wouldn't let him stop. "You all are letting her manipulate this," he barked, slamming his palm on the conference table. "She's clever with words, sure, but when it comes to leadership, she doesn't have what it takes." The room froze. That one sentence hung in the air like a thick cloud of smoke. It wasn't just criticism. It was venom. The undertone was unmistakable. A black woman like her couldn't possibly be fit to lead. Olivia knew it. The board member knew it. Everyone in that room knew it. For a moment, silence weighed heavy. Olivia felt the sting, not because his words held truth, but because they echoed what women like her had been told for centuries. "Sit down, stay quiet, don't rise too high." But she wasn't built to shrink. She straightened her shoulders, her voice cutting through the silence. "Greg," she said firmly, "I don't need to manipulate anyone. My work speaks louder than anything I could say. And if you think leadership looks like tearing down your own people in front of clients and colleagues, then maybe it's not me who doesn't have what it takes." A ripple moved across the room. People exchanged looks. Some nodded slightly. Greg opened his mouth to retort, but before he could, the board member raised a hand. "Enough!" His tone was sharp, commanding. "Greg, I've watched you for weeks undermine, dismiss, and try to belittle Olivia. Today, you crossed a line. Greg's jaw dropped. From this point forward, the board member continued, you're relieved of overseeing this account. Effective immediately, Olivia will take point, not just on this project, but on the entire client portfolio. Her leadership has already proven itself invaluable. The room erupted in murmurs. Greg's face went pale. He leaned back in his chair, stunned. His plan to humiliate Olivia had just cost him his authority. And Olivia, she didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply took a sip of water, steady and composed, as if she had known all along that the truth would eventually cut through the lies. The room was still buzzing when Olivia leaned forward, her tone calm but carrying a razor edge. I've spent years working harder, staying later, and delivering results that speak for themselves. I didn't ask for this fight, Greg. But since you forced it, let's be clear. She opened the binder in front of her and slid several neatly printed reports across the table. Charts, growth numbers, client feedback, her team's performance metrics. This, she said, tapping the reports, is leadership, not throwing tantrums in meetings, not insulting people in front of clients. Results. And whether you like it or not, these results came from me and my team. The board member nodded slowly, his expression one of satisfaction. The clients sitting across the table leaned forward. One of them, a senior partner from a multimillion-dollar firm, looked directly at Olivia. Frankly, if this is the level of professionalism and results you bring, I don't care who doesn't like it. I want you running our account. That was it. The final blow. Greg's head snapped toward the client, panic flashing in his eyes. His entire career had been built on those accounts. If they left him, his standing in the company would collapse. But it was too late. The decision had already been made. Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply let the silence stretch until everyone in the room understood what had just happened. Greg tried to sputter some excuse, something about miscommunication. But the board member shut him down with a single sentence. Greg, step outside. We'll finish this without you. The humiliation was complete. He had tried to make Olivia small, but instead, he was the one escorted out of his own meeting. As the door clicked shut behind him, Olivia sat taller. For the first time, the weight of his undermining tactics slid off her shoulders. The power that had been denied her was now undeniably hers. The clients smiled. The board members nodded. Even some of her colleagues, who had once hesitated to support her openly, looked at her with pride. And in that moment, Olivia didn't just win an argument. She changed the narrative. The bullies had been silenced. The underdog had risen. The shift in that room was seismic. The power balance had flipped in a matter of minutes, and everyone felt it. Greg never returned to that room. By the time the meeting wrapped up, the board had already decided. 2 days later, an internal email went out across the entire company. Effective immediately, Greg Harrison is stepping down from his managerial role. Olivia Bennett will be assuming leadership of the department moving forward. The truth? He wasn't stepping down. He was forced out. His arrogance, his humiliation tactics, and his inability to lead had finally caught up with him. When Olivia walked into the office the next morning, heads turned. Some smiled, some clapped quietly at their desks. Even those who had doubted her before, who had whispered in corners or stayed silent when Greg mocked her, now saw her differently. She wasn't just the woman Greg tried to tear down. She was the woman who stood back up and refused to be broken. Her team thrived under her. The clients who witnessed the showdown sent her personal notes of gratitude, praising her courage and professionalism. One even wrote, "You didn't just earn our respect, you earned our loyalty." Greg, he tried to land elsewhere, but his reputation followed him. Word spread fast in their industry, and his name became synonymous with arrogance and failure. But for Olivia, the victory was deeper than a promotion. One afternoon, as she sat in her new office, her nameplate freshly installed on the door, she thought back to that moment in the meeting, to Greg sneering, trying to strip her of her dignity in front of everyone, and to the silence that followed after she turned the tables. It wasn't just about career advancement. It was about something bigger, about every woman, every black professional, every underdog who had ever been told, "Know your place." Her place, she decided, was wherever she chose to stand. And the lesson was clear for everyone watching her story unfold. Never underestimate the quiet strength of the person you're trying to break. Because sometimes the one you try to humiliate becomes the one who rewrites the rules entirely. So the next time you see someone being silenced, mocked, or pushed aside, remember Olivia's story. Dignity doesn't come from a title. Power doesn't come from fear. Real leadership comes from courage, integrity, and refusing to stay small. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments. What would you have done in Olivia's shoes?